everyone, and welcome to How to Land That Job Appeals webinar. My name is Chandler Sheck Snyder, and I am the director of the Appeals Ambassador Program. And on behalf of Appeals, also known as Pharmacy Initiative Leaders, we hope that you and your loved ones are safe and well during this pandemic. This webinar tonight is brought to you by the Appeals Ambassador Program, which is an extension to the Appeals mission of bridging the gaps in the pharmacy profession. The ambassadors, as you see here, serve as your professional consultants for their respective fields. And tonight, our panel of ambassadors would like to give you insight into the pharmacy workplace. But before we get started, I want to say a few different tips. We do have a chat box, but in the chat box, you are able to answer, or ask any questions. But we also have some pre-submitted questions that we'll go through first, and hopefully be able to filter through the ones that you just submitted through the chat box. Also, I want to let you know that through the chat box, we have Dr. Joshua Blackwell, who will be facilitating the chat box. But who also will be facilitating the entire discussion is our amazing host, Dr. Ashley Harold. Dr. Harold is a clinical pharmacy specialist in cardiology at the South Texas VA. She is also the director of the renowned Pills Coach Program. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Harold.
Thank you, Chandler, for that introduction. I'm glad everyone is safe and sound. I'm glad everyone is on this phone call tonight. And we're going to get some interesting insight to how to land that job. But before we get into it, we'll just start off with introductions by our panel. And we'll start with Dr. Abdul.
Hi, everyone. Is everyone able to hear me?
Yes,
Can you
ma'am.
guys? Okay, perfect. Okay, so hi, everyone. My name is Jacinda Abdul. I graduated from the University of St. Joseph School of Pharmacy. It's an accelerated 3-year in Hartford, Connecticut. I completed my PGY1 residency at the Howard University Hospital. I'm currently an in vitro pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics research fellow with Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan. In August of this year, I'll be beginning as a assistant professor tenure track at Loma Linda University, where I'll be transitioning into critical care and infectious diseases.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Abdul. Next, we'll have an introduction by Dr. Roduta.
Hello, everyone. My name is Thomas Roduta. I am a proud graduate of Texas Southern University College of Pharmacy 2016. I completed a PGY1, PGY2 Masters in Health System Pharmacy Leadership and Administration associated with the Houston program at Memorial Hermann Health System. And after that, I accepted the Pharmacy Operations Manager position at Memorial Hermann Memorial City Medical Center. I am also the Residency Program Coordinator for the Health Administration Program at Memorial Hermann. Thank you for having me.
I see you as a TSU grad. Okay, thanks for joining us. Okay, next we'll have an introduction by Dr. Shands.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Starr Shands. I am a graduate of Hampton University. I graduated in May of 2018. Upon graduation, I worked in community for a year. I worked for Walgreens for a year. Then I transitioned to my current position. I am a clinical pharmacy specialist at Gallup Indian Medical Center in Gallup, New Mexico. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak on this panel.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Okay, and last but not least, we have Dr. McLemore.
Everybody, Jeremy McLemore, 2017 graduate of the Howard University College of Pharmacy. Immediately after graduation, I went straight into the workforce at Blue Shield of California. And for about a year and some change, I was at Blue Shield of California and SCVS Pharmacy, working PRN as a floater pharmacist. And for the past year and just about 4 months now, I've been in immunology sales with AbbVie, representing Rinvoq and Humira, both for rheumatoid arthritis.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, so let's get into how to land that job. Before we get started, thanks everyone for submitting these wonderful and insightful questions. We were talking about them earlier, and we feel like anyone can learn from this, even myself. So I'm really excited to hear what our panelists have to say. So the first question I have is, how do I land a job in today's virtual environment? Great question. For this, I will let Dr. Roduta answer it.
All right. So as I understand the question, it is based off of the fact that a lot of interviews right now are being held virtually via Zoom, Skype. So that is how I'm interpreting that question. That's how I'm going to answer it. I just want everyone to know that this is kind of different for the other side as well, in terms of the people who are interviewing. So we're trying to navigate it ourselves as well. The most important thing is that you still have to practice. For an interview that is virtual, a lot of people think that, oh, I'm at home, I don't necessarily need to practice as much. You absolutely still need to. You can definitely tell a lot easier when someone who is ready for an interview versus someone who's not, even in a virtual setting. The most difficult part about doing something virtual is you can't really gauge the room like you can in person. A lot of people use body language, even the face of the person, especially if it's over a phone call. It's very difficult to gauge the room because sometimes it's just like this, where you're on a call with an unknown amount of people on the other side, and you still have to be able to show your personality and still be able to answer the question at hand. So my advice to this is you have to prepare yourself both inside and out. Dress the way that you would dress going into a live interview. So wear a suit for the gentlemen, wear you know, a business dress for women, just to make it as real as possible. You also want to remove yourself from a comfortable environment. You don't want to take it from your bedroom or your living room. Try to go somewhere that kind of sparks great ideas rather than somewhere where you sleep or lounge or watch TV. That is just to get yourself prepared both inside and out. Overall, you have just about the same amount of time to be able to express yourself in the way that you would want to. It's best to use kind of your facial expressions to kind of show your personality. So smile through when you talk, have energy when you talk, because a lot of people kind of think that because I'm on the phone, I can just have a normal conversation rather than taking the entire thing seriously. It is different for sure, but you still need to make that extra effort.
Yes, I completely agree. And then we also have some additional information in the group chat, just kind of further talking about the things that you can do to ensure that you still stand out amongst the crowd, even if you're not being seen. Okay, thank you for that. Does anyone else have anything to add? All right, well, we'll keep it moving. What experiences are needed in pharmacy school and or during my postgraduate opportunity to land that job? Awesome question. For this, Dr. McLemore, do you mind telling everyone how to do this?
Sure. So in looking at things that you can do while you're in pharmacy school and after graduation, I would say one of the most common things that's come up for me is leadership, right? And by leadership, I mean executive level. So being, if you can, and if the opportunity presents itself, being president, vice president, or, you know, something close to the top of different organizations at your school. For a lot of people, and I'll speak to industry mostly. So, I mean, the reality is that a lot of people may not get the opportunity to do an industry rotation. But there's a lot of things you can do to make yourself competitive. Getting an internship, working while you're in school, So whether that be CVS, Walgreens, what have you, if you can, you know, finding unique internships and unique experiences to differentiate yourself, I feel like that gives you the best opportunity to be successful upon graduation. Now, as far as postgraduate opportunities, for me, anything postgraduate, still treat it like you're a student on rotation. And what I mean by that is, you know, even my initial opportunities postgraduate, I was still setting up one-on-ones with people, with my leadership and my superiors, still being hungry for information, and, you know, still being willing to learn as much as you can so that you can put yourself in a position to get to whatever role it is that you want next.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And again, we have some things in the group chat kind of highlighting, you know, the approach should be looking at your 3 to 5 year goals. And the wonderful thing about postgraduate experiences and opportunities is that a lot of the times, if you're doing fellowship or if you're doing residency, those things align with what you're trying to do, right? So going into clinical or going into industry. And as you're going through that process and matriculating, you have the opportunity to select your rotations, be a part of committees, all the different things that you can do in those positions will, you know, buck your CV up, kind of aid in helping you land that job. So great, thank you for that. All right, the next question I have is networking a huge part of landing a job, or can I rely solely on my qualifications? Okay, so Dr. Abdul, I think you can answer this question and tell everyone how to land that job by networking or relying on your qualifications.
I think that networking is always something that I have definitely a love and hate relationship with. Like, it's kind of one of those things. It's a necessary evil, but I mean, it's definitely not a comfortable thing to do. So for me, I took a bit of a different pathway than a lot of other people that I know. I did a research fellowship. That meaning I do an in vitro research fellowship, meaning that I'm primarily on the bench. And so I did only a PGY1. I didn't choose to do a PGY2. So that already put me at a bit of a disadvantage when it came to kind of doing infectious diseases, which is something that's highly specialized for sure. So in regards to me getting that fellowship, honestly, it was networking. So my mentor is actually a PILS ambassador as well, Dr. Kiera Dotson. She also completed a research fellowship. And while she was doing her fellowship, she kind of gave me a bit of information as to what a fellowship was and et cetera. But her fellowship mentor was somebody that I networked with, and knowing that I was from Detroit, he kind of put me in touch with who is my fellowship director today, Dr. Michael J. Ryback, which allowed for me to end up in the position that I am currently. So I will say that for my fellowship, networking for anything is a necessary evil. But when it came to me getting the job that I will be starting in August, so me transitioning into academia as an actual professor, I will say that if you network correctly, you kind of set yourself up to where you can kind of end up in a position where, I don't know how to put this into terms, and maybe somebody else can try to can better say what I'm saying here. But you put yourself in a position where kind of your work speaks for yourself, or you get a mentor, you network with the right person to where knowing that you've worked with that person, that kind of vouches for the person that you are and the kind of product that you'll have, the kind of product that you'll produce. So with that, kind of just wrapping this up and putting it into perspective, my fellowship director, Dr. Ryback, is the first author of the vancomycin guidelines. So with that, people in infectious diseases, I mean, they really trust him because he writes the VAN guidelines. So with that being said, with me being one of his fellows, when I go into jobs, they automatically kind of hone in on the fact that Dr. Ryback is my fellowship mentor, that he supports me. So because I will say, because I effectively networked at that initial stage of me progressing and matriculating through infectious diseases, I kind of set myself apart and put myself in a good position to where I could work underneath a mentor and ultimately end up in the position where I am going to be in a few months. So I will say that networking is definitely necessary. It's definitely necessary at each stage, but you want to be intentional with the networking that you do.
A small tidbit to add on the end of that. As far as networking, right? Networking with people who are in a position to have impact on your hiring process, it puts you in a position to have somebody speaking positively on your behalf when you're not in the room. And that's, for me, that's been what's most helpful, right? So I mean, if you have, you know, these hiring managers and you know, people in these bosses, people in these positions, they can get anywhere from, you know, dozens to hundreds of applications. How do you distinguish, you know, a residency application when they all look exactly the same? And one of the ways you can set yourself apart is having somebody speak on your behalf because you network with them at a conference, or you know, maybe they were your classmate way back in the day, or whatever. But you know, having somebody who can advocate on your behalf will give you a leg up every time.
Absolutely. And just even further piggybacking on, there's been a conversation in the group chat talking and asking, or more so defining, what effective in networking is. And there's a lot of great insight in the group chat. And I'll just add to say, essentially, networking is effective and considered successful when, Dr. McLemore, what you just said, when you're not around, people have positive things to say about you. And people don't know or think about this, but every time you have the opportunity to speak with someone, that is an opportunity to network, or at the very minimum, ensure that it's not the opposite of networking, you know, reflecting badly upon yourself. You'll hear this a million times over. Pharmacy is a small world, and it truly is. It gets smaller every day. And as you continue in this profession, it continues to get smaller. So you want to make sure that you have meaningful and positive impressions that you're putting out into the pharmacy world, so that when people speak about you, they can speak of, you know, your integrity or the great job you did, or even just a positive interaction that they had with you. So I'll just add that to the conversation as well. Okay, so the next question that was submitted is, if I don't have a residency or any other pharmacist experience under my belt, what are my chances of getting a job straight out of pharmacy school? And if you were in this position, what advice would you give yourself? That's a great question. Dr. Shands, I will allow you to answer this question.
So I definitely resonate with this question. So I personally did not pursue residency post-grad. I chose to go straight into the workforce. And when I decided to transition positions, it did occur to me that I was going into a clinical pharmacy position and I didn't have a residency. I did not let that stop me at all, because I knew I was just as qualified, in the sense that I would work very hard to gain the knowledge that I need to gain for said position. So with that being said, so it says, if I don't have residency or any other pharmacist experience, what are my chances? Your chances are high. And I know that from experience. So my advice on that point would be, from the last question, network. I would not be in my current position if it were not for networking. There were alums who worked at my current hospital. So I work for Indian Health Services. There were alums who performed very well in my hospital, current alums who are still there, who didn't necessarily know me personally, but because they could speak on the fact that I graduated from Hampton, they were like, she has to be a qualified candidate in that sense. So if there's strong alum, like, always reach out to alums. More than likely, there's somebody that graduated from your school that's in the position that you want to be in. So any advice I would say do your research on the position. Network with people in that space, and just in a way to gain more research, and be eager. Because so I had two things I felt in my head that were against me. I didn't have a residency and I was a new grad. When I got my position, I was less than a year out of school applying to a clinical pharmacy position, a clinical pharmacy specialist position. And I used that as leverage because I was new. This was in, let's say, an empty canvas. Let's use that. There was so much room to learn. It wasn't like you had to teach somebody something new or you had to unlearn things. It was, I'm already a new pharmacist, so this is a space where I can learn so much. And when you're eager and you're ready to learn and you're open to change, it's not hard, in my opinion, to get a different job. You can't let residency hold you back, because I use that as an excuse of why I thought I was going to be stuck in retail. So when I decided to change jobs, my mentor told me, if you let that stop you, you are you're holding yourself back. So my main advice is, don't look at what you don't have, look at what you do offer to the table. If you're eager, you're ready to learn, you're ready to be an asset to the hospital or facility that you're working at, that's your leverage.
That have previously been Thank you for that, Dr. Shands. Okay, so I know we have questions that have been previously asked ahead of time. However, I got an amazing question in the chat right now, so I am going to ask it. Okay, so it's going back to this virtual environment and the changes associated with it. With regards to residency and fellowship interviews and going forward, how can they still remain competitive is the question. Especially if you don't have, experiences like having a poster presentation. So, Dr. Roduta, I know you spoke previously about the virtual world and how to remain competitive with interviews right now, but kind of forecasting, what are your thoughts about what people can do at this time to remain competitive, especially if the circumstances do not change?
The best way I can answer that is really take advantage of your situation right now. Situate yourself in an environment where you are not losing some of that knowledge that you already have. So for those who are still in pharmacy school, if you are on rotations, start building a repository of things that are unique. Things that you as a student pharmacist were able to intervene on. For the most part, once you get that interview, to get that interview, you have to network, you have to have the qualifications. But once you get that interview, the questions between someone who already has experience versus someone who is brand new out of pharmacy, they're going to be the same. So think about hey, tell me about yourself. We want to know your work ethic, but then, one of the questions we love to ask is, what has been one of your greatest or best interventions? A lot of people I do a lot of IV to PO, renal dosing. It's just very mundane things. It's even if it is a mundane intervention, if it meant something that changed a perspective or changed the course of the throughput of a patient, being able to speak on that, and a little bit of it is building or setting yourself up, or for lack of a better word, gassing yourself up, doing a lot more than what actually happened, but really talking through some of those experiences and how it affected you, how it affected the patient, remaining competitive is essentially you have to take advantage of your current situation and make the best of it, so that when you do have that opportunity to speak of yourself, you have a full repository of things that you can pull back from to be able to demonstrate what kind of a practitioner you are.
Awesome. Thank you for that insight, Dr. Roduta. Okay, so I'll get back to the set questions that we have. The next question I have is, how do you stand out when applying to hospital positions without a residency? So, Dr. Roduta, I think you'll be a good person to answer this question as well.
Sure. So it's kind of a piggyback from the question that I just answered right now. Without a residency, honestly, once you get that interview, again, the questions are going to be the same. So it's to the point of how do you get that interview? Applying to a hospital position without a residency, and just to be perfectly honest with kind of how things are, we'll kind of demonstrate via numbers here in Houston, Texas. So just in Texas in general, we have, just depending on who you ask, we have up to 7 pharmacy schools here in Texas alone. So if every pharmacy school has about 100 students, that means every year we're turning about 700 pharmacists, all looking for jobs right at the end, between May and June. So the kind of honest truth there is that there are a lot of qualified candidates applying for the same positions, especially within a large, for those who know Houston, we have a large medical center, but then we also have a lot of community hospitals as well. So you have a lot of applicants going for the same position. So it's very important to understand that there are going to be people who just graduated pharmacy school who are going to apply for these positions, as well as people who are seasoned, people who are trying to move around within their position. So let's say that internally there are people who are trying to move up within the hospital. You also have people who have years of experience already or a residency trying to apply for the same position. So just being fair and understanding what the market out there, you have to be able to be flexible. One of the things that as someone who reviews CVs on a regular basis, what I do love to see is, okay, so you're applying for a supplemental position rather than a full-time position just to get your foot in the door. Or you're even going outside of your normal city of work. So for instance, if you were in Houston, Texas, you're going a little bit further, let's say like Beaumont, which is, I want to say, about a 2-hour drive away, and working at a smaller hospital to gain that experience, and then bringing that experience to a more or a larger hospital. So when you're applying to hospital positions, you have to situate, again, yourself with as much experience as possible. And even for those who are in pharmacy school, you shouldn't, or you should continue to look for internships, technician roles, things that really get your foot in the door, and so that other people can see your work ethic even as a student learner at that point. And for those who already finished pharmacy school, you should really be looking at opportunities that really build your clinical knowledge. A lot of those order entry pharmacists, those kind of positions are pretty much dead. A lot of the things that we try to do now in the hospital are very clinical, very patient-centered. So being able to practice those and develop those strengths in a different position so that you can stand out when you apply for these hospital positions will suit you very, very well.
All right, thank you for that, Dr. Roduta. Okay, and just a reminder, I know there's questions coming in the group chat and those are being answered. We do have several questions to continue to get through, so let's try to keep the answers to a minute to maybe 2 minutes to ensure that we can get everyone's questions answered. And do your best. If the spirit moves you and you feel like you have more to say, of course, I completely understand. Okay, so what additional certifications should one receive to stand out better for jobs? And follow-up question to that, if you are already a pharmacist, how can you be a part of PILS? Okay, so Dr. Shands, can you answer this question for us?
Yes, I can. So I did, just following up on the last question, I took it upon myself when I was practicing in community to do additional CEs because I knew I wanted a hospital position. So specifically, I wanted to work for IHS. So I looked up the specific hospitals that I wanted to work in and what disease states they focused on. And I did like certifications and CEs on those. And that came up in my interview. That I, for example, diabetes, anticoagulation are very huge. Diabetes and anticoagulation are very huge at my hospital. So those were some CEs that I did. If you're already a pharmacist, how can you be a part of PILS? That was very easy in my opinion. I definitely remember reaching out to Chandler and saying that I want to be a part of PILS. I feel like people need to know about IHS. I feel like people need to know about the federal sector. And I was very passionate. I feel like when I reached out and I pretty much presented how could my expertise or my knowledge base benefit PILS. And here I am. So I think it's simple in my opinion to, as long as you can voice how you can add to be a part of PILS, I think it's very simple. I think it's a pretty forward process on how to be a part of it. But definitely, I think if you're trying to transition careers, I think it's best to gain the knowledge base, whether that's certifications, CEs, etc., to that would gain your knowledge, that would build up your knowledge base in order to proceed forward in your career, because that's definitely what I chose to do.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Dr. Shands. Okay, so the next question I have is, what are the key aspects to highlight on a CV? And when should you take off rotation? That is a great question because I feel like I've been practicing forever and I still have mine there. So I'm interested to hear what the panel has to say. Dr. McLemore, you might answer this question for the audience.
Sure. So as far as when should I take off rotations, was that the question or part of one?
That's one part. And then also, what key aspects should you highlight on a CV?
Okay. So as far as the taking off of the rotation, my strategy for when to take off from rotations, I took off whenever I had an interview or something that was going to lead me to a job. And I feel like most preceptors should understand that and be sensitive to it. If you're asking when should you take your off block, I'm not sure how every school does it, but I understood when the interview schedule was for what I was applying for. And so I set it for, I think it was like January or February of the graduating year, so that I could be off and be able to do that. But if you can't, your preceptor should be sensitive to it. As far as what to highlight on a CV, I would say, there are differences between a CV and a resume. A CV looks more, so it's a curriculum vitae, so it looks at your total body of work and everything. But I would say do your best to highlight and really flesh out and give great detail for the things that are most important or pertinent to whatever job that you're applying for. So if it's an industry position, did you have industry rotations? When have you worked in a team? If it's sales, do you have sales experience? Can you speak about that in your CV or your resume? So you definitely don't want to put everything back to your first job in high school unless it's that important or pertinent to what you're applying for. And there's a ton of resources out there, especially within PILS. I mean, there's a gang of people who can coach you on that if that's something that you're interested in.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. McLemore, for that. And I'll say the reason why I haven't taken off my rotation experiences is exactly the reason you just said. You need to be aware of where you're applying, what type of job is this. A lot of your rotations from a residency experience will highlight your capability of doing that job. So you may look up in 5 years down the line, you're still highlighting the fact that you had a cardiology rotation if you want to be a cardiology pharmacist. So yeah, I completely agree. And as you said, ambassadors are easy to contact, and that's a great question, as there's always going to be someone in the field that you're looking for that can maybe highlight what you should have on your CV versus not. Awesome. Okay. The next question I have is, I applied, got rejected, and the same job posting is still up. Should I reapply? Great question. For this, Dr. Roduta, I think you'd be an excellent person to answer this.
Oh, I'm conflicted. I would say, oh God, no. But to be honest, you really have to be smart about it. I can speak on behalf of Memorial Hermann, a health system here in Houston, Texas. HR really does screen the people who apply. So for instance, if you applied, got rejected, and you apply again, HR will screen that and probably will reject you even before it hits my mailbox to review the application. But the simplest answer to this is, if you got pretty far into the interview stage to where you actually spoke with the hiring manager, I would advise that you do not reapply, honestly, because you're going to be reapplying to the same panel, to the same hiring manager. What is different? What are you bringing that's different to the table? It's not that like you have another job between that time. So honestly, in this case, it's a really, I caution to applying again after you've got rejected. So the reason why I say I caution is, for instance, there are some specific qualifications. I'll talk about a technician job that we have that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get the job. So a hard stop for one of my technician jobs is that you have to have IV certification. However, for one of my medication history technicians, which has the same job profile, it's really messed up, but it still says that it requires IV certification. Obviously, a medication history technician doesn't need it. So automatically HR sends a canned email saying like, you don't qualify for the position. But I've actually had to reach out to the person and say like, hey, actually, I'm going to pull your application. So, I mean, you have to be very cautious. If it's one of those automatic emails, it would be prudent to even reach out to the HR partner or the hiring manager to see like, hey, what was the reason why my application got screened out? But in general, no, I would not reapply for a job that you've interviewed for and got rejected.
Awesome. Thank you for that answer. Okay. So when asked, where do I see myself in blank years? We'll say 5 years. How do I answer if I don't plan on being at that job long? That's a great question. Dr. Shands, can you answer this question for the audience, please?
So I do think this is a great question. So what I have done, because that's kind of my current situation, I think, that I would say I will gain attribute A, B, and C from this role and incorporate it in the sense that, you're applying for that specific job for a reason. So you would gain a certain amount of knowledge from said job. This is specifically with IHS. I know they know typically with every site, people only stay for about 3 to 5 years and either move around in IHS or they move around in the government. So they know they're going to be there for a certain amount of time, because you have at least like a year commitment. But I would say in regards to that, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? Name off the attributes or list the qualifications that you would gain from that specific position that would benefit you in the future. I will gain this set of knowledge from this position. I will gain this. So where do you see yourself in 5 years? I see myself being in this position, and I would make a point to, if whatever position you list off that you see yourself in 5 years, that it aligns with something that could be at that position. That could be at that facility, or in that space. Like, so in the clinical pharmacy space, an example that I used on my interview, because I got this question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I see myself being a clinical pharmacy specialist in the realm of psych and behavioral health. So my facility is currently building up their behavioral health department. So that was something. I see myself working in pain management. I see myself strengthening my skills in pain management. My facility has a pain management clinic. So all those things aligned with what I was already going to be learning in that position. So how you answer if you don't plan on being in that job that long, I would just simply state what I plan to gain from this position while I'm in it.
Absolutely. When you were talking, one of the things that I noticed is that in order to be able to answer this question, you need to know where you're applying. You know, going into any interview and applying to a facility, you need to know something about what they have available so that you can speak to how not only you see yourself growing, but how you see yourself growing, whether it's at that institution or not, you know. So I think that when you were talking, it really highlighted like doing your research ahead of time. And even if you don't see yourself being there, being able to speak to what's applicable with regards to what your goals are and what they have. Great answer. Okay, so the next question I have is it appropriate to name drop a friend or a contact while interviewing? Man, and this kind of highlights networking as well. And how do you do that effectively? Okay, so Dr. Abdul, I have this question for you.
Okay. So I think that this is one thing you just have to be very, very, very strategic. So I actually, it's perfect that you asked this question, and I randomly thought about something that happened to me. So actually, when I applied to CVS, because of course I was going for residency, but we all have CVS in our back pocket just in case. So I was applying to CVS, and they asked me if I knew any of the pharmacists, and then I name dropped one of my preceptors. Well, I was supposed to do a flu clinic with said preceptor, but ended up not being able to do it just due to having rotations in X, Y, and Z. And they had actually called that preceptor and talked to her. And, you know, I brought up the fact that I had talked to, that I had, you know, X, Y, and Z preceptor, and they were like, oh, we talked to her and she told us that you couldn't do blah, 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 blah. So that was an example of name dropping gone wrong. So I think that one is you have to be very strategic when you are name dropping. You have to make sure that the person that you are name dropping has nothing but great and phenomenal things to say about you. So I think that, yeah, so I think that that's one thing that you need to do. I want to say again, for residency, I went to Howard for undergrad, so I knew people that had completed the residency program as new pharmacists. So when I went into the residency program, I made sure to first and foremost be classy about the name drop. When I got the question asked to me, like, oh, why are you interested in becoming or completing this residency program here at the Howard University Hospital? One of my mentors had completed the residency program there. So that was something that I said. I said, you know, X, Y, and Z, Howard can offer me great clinical skills. It can offer me this, it can offer me that. I have a mentor that completed the program and they are doing X, Y, and Z. Therefore, I feel that the program could also afford me some of the same opportunities. So you just want to be strategic. And I knew that for a fact, if they were to go back and talk to that mentor would have nothing but excellent things to say about me, because I knew that we had built a good rapport, and I made sure that I'd always produce quality when I talked to said mentor, so that I could make sure that without a doubt, even despite the personal relationship that we had, that they'd be able to vouch for me. So I think that you just have to be very strategic in how you name drop, and you just want to make sure that you always put your best foot forward with everyone that you interact with. So in the event that you do decide to do that, that it works in your favor.
Absolutely. I couldn't echo the exact same thing better than you just did. Okay. In the group message, there's also been a lot of discussion regarding this topic. So feel free to check in and hear what other people have to say about name dropping gone wrong, and even the ability of your CV to name drop for itself. Actually, I don't think there's any interview I haven't been on where people say, "Do you know somebody that's on my CV?" So that's where having good things on your CV, making sure that you make those good connections, is important as well. Okay. The next question I have is, most positions have an area for cover letters. True. Are these synonymous with letters of interest? Should we use the you, me, us approach as well? Should I always submit a cover letter with my application? Okay. So Dr. Roduta and Dr. Shands would actually be really good people to answer this question. So Dr. Roduta, we'll let you start first.
Sure. I always think a cover letter or a letter of interest, I personally think they're very synonymous. I think it's a nice touch on top of the CV. It gives you an opportunity to maybe build or create a story outside of your CV. A CV is very polished, very militaristic in a sense that everyone's CV starts looking the same. A cover letter just kind of gives you an opportunity to showcase yourself a little bit more that isn't necessarily covered in your CV. So it's always a nice thing to do. The you, me, us approach is a standard way of tackling the cover letter. It does get a little monotonous if you're reading cover letter after cover letter, but a well-written cover letter, this is the best advice that I've had from one of my mentors way back, is imagine a room full of 100 people reading CVs and cover letters. Your cover letter should get one person within those 100 people to say, "Hey, come over here, read this cover letter." That is how you should approach your cover letter. It shouldn't be a formal you, me, us approach standard, but something a little bit different, something that might inspire someone, something inspirational. That's that's definitely something that really adds to the application.
Awesome. Dr. Shands, did you have anything to add, or I think Tom covered it really well?
Yes, I do. First of all, I definitely, I 100% agree with the points that Dr. Roduta has pointed out. If you write a cover letter, it definitely needs to be unique. It definitely needs to be inspiring, individualized, etc. If you ask me, have I written a cover letter for every single position that I've applied for? No, I have not. For my current position, I did not write a cover letter because it was optional. So I didn't do it. But I have written cover letters, and I've actually reviewed cover letters for colleagues. Please don't make it a cookie cutter cover letter. Do not, like, I've gotten sent templates when I first didn't know anything about the cover letter space, and they were just generic. If you're gonna write a cover letter, please don't make it generic. Please, oh God, please don't make it generic. So make it Make it, because I've read some cover letters, okay? And I'm just like, no, don't do that. So my point with that being, not to get off topic, is if you're going to write a cover letter, it needs to be the essence of you. It needs to have you all over it. And so a past position that I did apply for, I had my mentor read it, some colleagues read it, and I try to have other people read it to make sure it doesn't sound generic. So the you, me, us approach, if I'm reading that right, I wouldn't use that personally. Make it all about you. Make it special. Make it interesting. Like, if you're gonna write a boring cover letter, I personally don't see the point. So, like, cover letters, the entire point is to give them a script, like a quick blurb of who is this person. If this person is like everybody else, that cover letter is gonna just show it. So that's the chance. If you're gonna use a cover letter, make it something worth reading.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Thank you for that insight. Okay, so we don't have a lot of time left, so I'm going to start skipping around for questions. Dr. Shands, since you were previously talking, this is a great question for you. How do I get a job in the Indian Health Services now that the space is also getting very competitive?
I love this question so much, and whoever answered it, like, my heart glows with this question. So, how to get a job when it's competitive. So, I didn't know anything about Indian Health Service until I got to my rotation at the FDA. So, I had a rotation at the FDA right when I took a job in community. So, I learned about that. How to get a job, network. I have said it before and I'll say it again. I would not be in this position if I did not network. And so I was very active in SNAFA when I was in pharmacy school. And like I said, your alumni from your school they play such a huge part. So there were alums from my school that I reached out to. I had a couple friends who were in the IHS space, and I emailed them or found their number from somebody and asked permission, obviously, to like text them and everything. Hey, can we talk for like 30 minutes? Can we talk for 15 minutes? It's just so I can do some more research on the IHS space. Do your research with IHS, because since a lot of people, like, it's very well known, don't get me wrong, but a lot of people don't actually know what IHS completely like involves, don't know like the things that you'll be exposed to, et cetera. Do your research, network with people, because this is the government. So IHS, there are federal and tribal sites, but there are more federal than tribal sites. So make sure you know the people. So one thing that definitely I feel like landed me this job was I did so much research on the sites that I applied to. I networked. So when I first was looking at sites, when I was researching on IHS.gov, there is a job opportunities tab. There are emails and numbers. Every single site that I applied to, I called and spoke to the director of pharmacy at every single site, to the point where I called the site I'm currently working at in December. A couple months later, the director of pharmacy called my cell phone while I was doing a 12-hour shift at Walgreens, and asked me point blank period, do you remember talking to me a couple months ago? I remember you. Do you have time for an interview on July 1st? Look, I was stunned because I was like, first off, I didn't even think this woman remembered me. She offered me an interview. She just straight asked me, do you want an interview? Yes. I had an interview on the 1st. I got an offer about the 10th. Networking works. Like, so in IHS, if you want to be competitive, stand out. Do not be afraid to reach out to sites. Do your research on every single site you apply to, because IHS offers so much stuff. They know people want the perks, but you have to be in it for the right reasons, so directors can tell why you applying to IHS. If you can present them your best self and present the serious reasons why you want to work for IHS, there should be no issue in getting a job. So my point, network, research, be compassionate, and be a team player, be eager to start a position and working for an underserved population.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. So be competitive. Make sure that you are a go-getter if you want that job in IHS. Okay. And for those who aren't seeing the chat, we are going to run out of time, but I'm going to try my best to ask the questions to the panel for those who can't stay on. Okay. So what strategies did you use to prepare and be confident for your interviews? Dr. McLemore, can you answer this question for us, please?
Yeah, so strategies to be confident for your interview. Man, I'll say this: I put a lot of preparation into any interview that I'm going into. So that's you know, understanding the company. I mean, everybody doesn't necessarily have to do this. If I have the names of the people I'm interviewing with, the hiring managers, I'll look up their LinkedIn, social media, Facebook, Instagram, what have you. I have a few interview guides that I go through all of the questions to make sure I know what I would say or how I would respond. I talk to mentors or, you know, colleagues, friends, classmates who may be in the position or in the similar position at another company. So, you know, I can't tell you what being 100% or feeling like you 100% prepared looks like for you, but when you know that, you know, in your heart of hearts that you've done everything you can to prepare and you've done your best, at that point, all that's left is to just take a deep breath and be yourself. So, you know, just like when you're studying, you know when you feel like you're prepared or not. It's very similar concept when you're interviewing. So, you know, when you put in the work, you know that you've put in the work, and from that point, you just have to let the interview speak for itself. So, I mean, you don't, you know, when you get to the game is just putting everything that you practice to work. So make sure that you put in the effort and practice.
Absolutely. Okay. The next question I have is submitted, and it says, I've been working for job A for a few months, but my dream job just posted online. Should I apply, or would it look bad to job B? That's a great question. Dr. Abdul, can you answer this question for us?
Yes, ma'am. So just to make sure that I'm reading this question right, the person has been working for job A, but job B is the dream job?
Absolutely. They want job B real bad.
Okay. So this is one thing that I definitely live by is at the end of the day, these people will replace you as fast as they hire you. So, and you only get one life, live it well. So at the end of the day, if job A is not where you want to be, then I mean, I'm not gonna tell you. I'm gonna give you my answer and then give you what other people would likely say. So for me, I'm not gonna tell you to stay in the midst of job A when job A is not necessarily where you want to be, where you want to live your life. I think that I would really just take heed to this pandemic. Like a lot of people's lives, I mean, and this is real life. Like people's lives are being cut short. Why spend time doing something that you don't want to do? Doing something that you can't see better in your life, doing something where you can't see yourself practicing in the capacity in which you want to practice. So I would apply to job B strategically, and it's something that my mentors have, my mentor, my fellowship mentor and other mentors have told me, that you want to work a job for minimally 2 years, and then you want to go ahead and pursue a new job. So, I mean, if you are worried about what it'll look like to the hiring authorities, then I urge you to spend that year there at job A, and then hopefully, you know, job B will still be present. But I mean, in light of, you know, current times and just the fact that life is short, I would say that if it's in your heart and if you feel as though job B is absolutely where you can't see yourself doing anything other than job B, and you don't feel like you'll be able to get what you want from job A, then I say go for job B.
I do want to add, we asked a question previously, the one where it says, when asked, where do I see myself in so many years, how do I answer if I don't plan on being at this job for that long? It's just important to be honest. If you say that, hey, I am trying to strengthen this part of my training right now, but in 5 years, I want to be in job B, and then job B opens, at least the hiring manager or the department that you are working for, they know that this is your goal. So it's not going to be a surprise. They're not going to be thinking long-term job prospects for you. They already know that this is something that you're here for a short while, however long that is.
I definitely want to chime in with that. I personally, this definitely happened to me. I decided 6 months into working in retail that I didn't want to do anymore. And I got hired for my current position, and I had barely been working in that job for 9 months. So it happens. It happens. You find the job that you want is open. I don't believe that you should wait a certain amount of time, like a by the book amount of time. I do agree with Dr. McLemore. You should have a good reason on why you're leaving, but to stay in a job that you don't want to be in for X amount of time just so it can look better, I personally don't agree with doing that. I do think if I had to go by a rule, I would say minimum 6 months. But I think I would apply for job B because I did. So.
Awesome. So I will say, in hearing what the panel said, and then also reading the chat, everyone seems to be saying similar things with a twist. In essence, it sounds like, it seems like everyone's saying, be aware and be open and honest, up front, so that when jobs hire you, they know what your end goal is. And then also, if you're doing so, like Dr. McLemore said in the chat, be very sure that's the move you want to make, because again, the overarching theme is pharmacy is small. You never want to burn any bridges or offend anyone. And that's where, coming from Dr. Roduta's standpoint, being open and transparent in the beginning. So no one's ever going to have the thought process of, this person said they wanted to be here for the next 5 years. The 5 years is up really fast. So you just want to make sure that you're moving in a manner that you're comfortable with. And unfortunately, you're going to always have to do what's best for you, and you can answer that question for yourself, what that looks like. But always be cognizant of how you answer questions, especially in an interview setting, with the thought process that I know dream job B may be out there waiting for me. So good insight, y'all. Okay. Let's see. Question, how do I follow up after the interview without being too pesky? Good question. Dr. Roduta, you may have some thoughts about this.
So you have to read the hiring manager. So for instance, if you're sending email after email and you're not getting prompt responses, let's say it's taking more than 72 hours, you're probably being quote unquote pesky. It will be, this is a hard question to answer, especially if you are calling the hiring manager or the HR business partner and your answers are very much the same, or canned answers, like, we're still reviewing candidates, we'll let you know. If it's not like a definitive answer, kind of just read between the lines, understand what they're talking about. The best way, honestly, is give it some time, usually around the interview, or actually during the interview, ask them what are the next steps, what can I expect, at least in terms of communication from you. And once they kind of tell you, like, hey, it's going to take a couple weeks, understand what that means and say, like, okay, so let me reach out to this person in a couple weeks, right? If you're not getting those answers, a follow-up email is appropriate. But again, it's a very true statement. You can get really pesky with trying to follow up, especially if you're leaving message after message, email after email. You will get in, the hiring manager will get in contact with you if you are moving onto the next step of the interview, or if you're moving onto the next step of onboarding or of some sort. If you're really interested in the position, and if they're really interested in you, they will follow up with you in a timely manner. So kind of understand that there are certain things that slow down the process, and it's not necessarily meaning that they're not following up with you, but sending an email or following up based off of the conversation you had at the end of the interview would be the best way to approach follow-up after the interview.
Okay, thank you for that. There's also a question that's in the chat, basically stating, oh, okay, Josh handled that. And I think you also answered it as you continue to talk, being able to fill out who you're speaking with and follow-up question of when should I hear something. But the question essentially was, if you are contacting someone, wouldn't it show that you're really interested in the position? And Josh essentially answered that in the group chat. So I'll keep on going for the purpose of time. Okay. The next question I have is, I am a PGY1 resident at a community teaching hospital, but my skill set and interests are best suited for pharmaceutical industry, specifically medical affairs. How can I leverage my residency experience to secure a position in industry? Dr. McLemore, let's hear your thoughts regarding that.
All right. So just to recap, PGY1, community, but you feel like your skills are more so suited towards medical affairs. I would say, I'm going to assume you're towards the end of that residency. I hope that you've been keeping a log of like the things you've been able to do and accomplish over that time. What's going to be the most important is talking about how those experiences are transferable to medical affairs, right? So there's, a lot of different disease states that you've touched. Maybe that one of those disease states is what, you'll be applying to as far as your job in medical affairs. So anything that's remotely related to where you're going, you should definitely highlight that. A lot of positions, medical affairs, specifically medical science liaisons, they're looking for PharmDs, people with postgraduate training, but you have to be really, really intentional about speaking about how, these experiences that I've had both in pharmacy school and over the past year, this is how that's going to translate to success in this new role that I am applying for. So, coming from a residency to pharmaceutical industry, it's not far-fetched at all. There's a lot of people who have done it, but you do have to put the groundwork in to be, again, very intentional about which skills you want to highlight and what you want to say about those skills, right? So for me, coming from managed care to pharmaceutical industry, everything that I did and worked on at Blue Shield of California was not necessarily relevant to the job that I'm in now. So my strategy was, I'm going to take the things that I feel like are most important or would be most key to talk about, and that's what I'm going to highlight. That's what I'm going to talk about in this interview. And that's a strategy that's been successful for me, and I think it's pretty replicable to your situation also.
All right, thank you for sharing that. Okay, and I'll just keep on moving. How do I get a job at CVS or Walgreens when everyone in my class is applying for the same position in a saturated market and every other school is applying as well? That's a good question. Dr. Shands, since you have some retail experience, I'm sure you have great insight to how to approach this situation.
Thank you. So I would say it helps if you're already an intern. So I worked as an intern for 3 years when I was in school. So I was networking around my district. Again, this is something where this is an example where networking comes in very handy. A way that you can stand out, because even in this realm, definitely it's important to stand out. So reach out to, if you plan on staying in that district, reach out to the district manager or district leader and schedule a time to talk about options is something I would suggest. Definitely reaching out to leadership, reaching out to different pharmacy managers, reaching out to, like I said, district leaders, district managers, etc., about your interest in working in retail. So I would say something that I definitely did when it came time, when I first became a fourth year and I really started deciding what I wanted to do, I started talking to members of leadership. So that included my store managers, other store managers. So I used to work at different stores when I was a intern. So I talked to different store managers, pharmacy managers, and just made sure that they knew that I was on track to, that I wanted a career in community. Because if they don't know, like if you're an intern already, if they don't know you want to work in community, the pharmacy managers in districts, they play a huge part in who gets hired there. And I would network if you plan to move. So I didn't end up practicing in the district that I was an intern in. So I made a point to network with other districts too, to make sure that they knew my interest and they knew when I was applying. So I would definitely suggest that.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the next question. So you've landed the job. What is the best way to go into a salary benefits negotiation instead of accepting the first offer out of fear of rejection? This is a really great question. So Dr. Roduta.
Sure. You got to remove that fear of rejection forthright. You'll never know until you ask. So when you're going into a negotiation for salary or benefits, it's important to do your research, seeing what's out there in terms of what people in the same profession or in the same kind of field that you are getting hired into are getting, and kind of knowing where you would stand in any negotiation. And I'll kind of give you insight behind the HR standpoint of this. There is a range. There's definitely a range within any kind of position. The lower part of the range is really reserved for someone who is a new graduate or with less experience versus someone who has years of experience. They usually get the median of that range or higher, depending on the experience of the person. But at the end of the day, that higher range of that position is literally the most that you could get from a salary negotiation or a benefit negotiation. So first of all, you got to remove that fear of rejection from there, because once that position has been offered to you, understand that they saw something within you that they want to take an investment in you. So they're trying to offer you this job. You never know until you ask. So just remove that fear of rejection. But again, still do your research.
All right, thank you, Dr. Roduta, for that. Okay, the next question I'm going to ask is for Dr. Abdul as well as Dr. McLemore. What are the pros and cons between getting a fellowship versus joining the industry down the line? And Dr. McLemore, you can take it first, and Dr. Abdul, you can follow up.
Okay.
Sure. So, man, as far as getting a fellowship, I would say you definitely set yourself up to be in a position to get a lot of networking done and make a lot of strong connections, given that you perform well during your fellowship. And ideally, you do your fellowship, whether that be 1 to 2 years, and it's more or less the direct line to some sort of industry role, whatever that may be. Doesn't necessarily have to be in what your fellowship was in. Now, I would say for me, in going more or less straight into industry without doing a fellowship, I would say the cons of that, I did miss out on, having a year, 2 years of just being internal and being able to network with people and make a name for myself internally. But the pros with that are, I graduate and I'm a full-time employee making full-time employee salary. And for me personally, I always feel like, I have a little small chip on my shoulder, and I'm proud of myself in that, hey, I still made it here without a fellowship. And, for me, it's motivation to continuously develop and improve myself, because, it was a challenge for me to get here. And I feel like that allows me to, always be working on myself and improving so that I can get to that next level. But again, the pros and cons to both. I would say take the opportunities that are available to you, right? So, I mean, the reality is that everybody's not going to be able to do a fellowship, and everybody's not going to be able to go straight into the workforce. But, there's an opportunity to do either one, right? You just have to set yourself up for success in doing whatever that is. If I had to choose one, it'd be tough for me. I mean, I feel like I would, if I had both opportunities presented before me, I probably would go with the full-time employment. But if you have the chance to, there's definitely a lot of upside to doing a fellowship also.
Thank you for that. Dr. Abdul, do you have anything to add? I know that your fellowship is somewhat different, but I'm sure you may have a couple things to add.
Right. So yeah, I did do a different. I am completing a different fellowship. So my fellowship is primarily research, with that research being in vitro, so bench mediated in vitro pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics. So typically with my role, people tend to, if they do go into industry, they go into becoming like a medical MSL, medical science liaison, or they become they go into R&D. So with that being said, I think the difference in, I don't know if you are able to become an MSL just fresh out of pharmacy school or not. I'm not exactly sure how that goes with industry, but the difference is that from the completion of the fellowship, and I've completed 2 years, I feel as though I am better equipped to first and foremost speak about the drugs. I can talk about the pharmacokinetics, the pharmacodynamics, the mechanism of action. I've actually conducted the research that that'll be used to push those medications, or to inform practitioners of the benefits of the medication. So I think that with me completing a research fellowship, or someone in my position, that'll help them as they become an MSL. So, I mean, in short, having that extra educational experience, or those extra educational experiences, it allows for you to just have a different backing and just a different approach as to how you complete the position. But that's not to say that it's something that you can't learn from being on the job. That's not to say that you can't, sit down and hammer out mechanism of action or pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics with a good old PK/PD workbook and work your way through that. So I think that is more so a matter of, would you rather a controlled learning environment to before you progress into the industry positions, or can you create that controlled learning environment for yourself and then progress and matriculate through the industry position? So I think it's just a matter of defining who you are and how you want to approach those positions.
All right, thank you for that insight, Dr. Abdul. And we have 2 questions left. So, and they're both for Dr. McLemore. So we'll just make this a 2-part question. Is it okay to take a contract position, and is the contract guaranteed? And then also the other question is, how do you break into industry when you live in a place like Texas?
All right, so for the first part, I am a fan of contract positions, and I have 2 close friends who now have full-time roles in industry through contract positions. No, it's not guaranteed, but the thing is, you take a contract position, and that is your opportunity to prove yourself and show yourself and earn a full-time role. So, you know, given the choice between, all right, I'm going to go into something that I probably didn't want to do versus I kind of am in industry, but I have to prove myself to fully be there, I'm going to bet on myself every time and take that contract role. And can you remind me what the other question was?
Yes. So how do you break into industry when you live in a place like Texas?
Okay, so I'm assuming that's kind of referring to, like, you know, somewhat, I guess some would say being at a disadvantage because you know, for whatever reason, we decided New Jersey was going to be the pharma capital of the U.S. So if this is for a student, I would just say, you know, again, reaching out to people and seeing who you know that can help you get to where you want to be, right? So whether that's alumni, I would start there. Whether that's thinking outside the box, basically, right? So looking at different organizations and people that can help you get to those roles. So for me, it was the National Black MBA Association, you know, National Sales Network. These are both minority organizations where pharmaceutical companies frequent and are looking to recruit talent. A lot of their meetings tend to be in New Orleans, Houston, Dallas, Atlanta, major cities like that. So you'll have the opportunity to meet people who can help you get to where you want to be. So I mean, like, I'm from Louisiana and went to pharmacy school in DC. You know, not a lot of pharmaceutical activity out there outside of maybe FDA. I mean, which is some would consider industry adjacent. But you know, where there's opportunity, you just have to be willing to look for it. So, you know, just to sum that all up, opportunities that are looking at people and opportunities that are off the grid or off the beaten path, that are non-traditional, I guess I'm trying to say, that most people wouldn't look at to help them get to where they want to be.
Thank you for that, Dr. McLemore. Okay, so that concludes the questions that I have for you guys. Panel, thank you for answering these questions and providing your thoughts and your insight. I'm sure the answers that you had helped a lot of people. And then also participants, thanks for joining. And I'll turn it over to Chandler at this time for closing remarks.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you everyone for taking time out. I know this went over time, but thank you so much. We hope that you gained some information and some knowledge from our wonderful, wonderful panelists and our wonderful host. We want to, you know, first and foremost, thank our each ambassador that's on the call. That's Dr. Abdul, Roduta, Shands, and Dr. McLemore for their amazing insight. Thank you again, Dr. Ashley Harold and Dr. Joshua Blackwell for doing so well with facilitating. And also thank you for all the PILS ambassadors as well as officers on the call right now. We appreciate your participation. Like I said, once again, we definitely thank the audience so much for engaging. If you thought this webinar was awesome, please let us know in the chat. Definitely follow us on Instagram at PILS, PILS Connect, as well as on Facebook at Pharmacy Initiative Leaders, PILS. Definitely like our page and definitely follow us as we, you know, try to impact the pharmacy profession. Also want to let you know to potentially engage in our We Play a Role initiative that's highlighting pharmacists' role in fighting COVID-19. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook, what we're doing with that, engage, as well as make your own videos detailing your role in fighting this pandemic. This webinar has been recorded, so there'll be more information from our social media with regards to where we can post it for your reference. As of right now, we want you all to be safe, be well, and, you know, have a great night. And like I said before, thank you so much, and we hope that you all succeed at every stage.
Hey, take it easy, everybody.